He's the kind of guy that doesn't just think outside the box, but he dismantles it. Then he uses the parts to build you a revenue generating machine. Author of the Revenue Acceleration Framework, founder and CEO of Lyft Enablement, with decades of experience working with more than 1,500 small, mid-sized companies hunting for growth, helping them to align their sales, their marketing, their customer success teams, making the complex simple. Hello, and thank you for joining me on the Practical Leadership Podcast. My name is Paul Morton. I'm your host. We try to distill the hard-earned wisdom of CEOs, executives, and high performers around the world into actionable insights that you can take away and put into your leadership practices really quickly. If it's time for you to look at your own management teams and help move them from being accidental into being intentional, then in 9 short weeks, the Practical Leadership Playbook course will help you do just that. Check out the Practical Leadership Academy. And now, on with the show. Doug Davidoff, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Paul, I'm looking around to see who you were talking about. That person sounds really, really impressive. Well, it is a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's good fun. Well, when you line it all up, you say it in 3.5 seconds. It's not too bad,
That's what I want. I want someone following me around who introduces my bio before I like. If you ever saw the movie Along Came Polly, the Philip Seymour Hoffman character who had the fake E entertainment crew following him around for his documentary, I always thought that's what I need. Somebody to. Anyway, sorry, I digress.
Well, then you get hubris. Then you have hubris. So what you actually need is the slave behind you saying, "Remember, thou art mortal."
You know what? I've never had a shortage of that. That's I've got that inner voice. Yeah, but no, I agree with you.
I too am mortal. Yes, full of failings and full of I leave a trail of devastation.
I tell you, Paul, that's why I tell people that they should work with us. I said, look, you know what? I've made more mistakes than you can even imagine. Yeah. And, the good news is I've learned from them. So, yeah.
I was talking to my boy the other day. He's 10. He's a wise, he's an old head and young shoulders. And I was talking to him about the definition of wisdom. And the one that I used and have been using for years is it's knowledge plus experience. So you use the knowledge, okay, plus reflection. And you've got to think about what you actually do with it, where it comes, what happens, etc. And he said, "No, Dad, you're wrong." I said, "Okay, 10-year-old philosopher, what am I missing?" And he said, "You've got to share it. Because otherwise you're a yoga person sitting on top of a mountaintop." He did say this. You're sitting on top of the mountaintop.
Going on 50.
Yeah, there you go. And it's for your own use. Unless you share it, it's of no use. And that leads to purpose. Doesn't that mean, isn't that purposeful, meaningful? I like that.
Yeah, and he's learned one of the hardest lessons. The teacher is the one who learns the most. So you share it not just because that's why we're here is to share, but you also learn so much more when you share. Wow, your 10-year-old son has quite a bit of wisdom right there, just reflected in that.
It's not bad. It's not bad.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just going to sit back and watch now. Maybe he can just go off and keep me. So when we wanted to talk here now, you've got the book there, Revenue Acceleration, the Framework for Revenue Acceleration. How do you make more money faster? Okay, there we go. Summarized. The key lever that I discovered, tripped up over in the last teams I was running, was I had all these fabulous sales managers who were great sellers. Mm-hmm. Some of them were superb managers. Most of them were accidental managers. Here's your team, off you pop. Good luck. And I think in your book, you talk about sales management as a critical growth lever. So you've got these people who are not just commanding, controlling, overseeing activity and badly looking into pipelines, but actually being critical for growth.
Yeah, I think there's 2 parts to that, right? There's the part that you just nailed. I sometimes wonder, is there even such a thing as someone who's a purposeful manager before they become a manager, right? You might strive being a manager, but once you become a manager in any discipline, you learn very, very quickly it's very different than what you imagined. And basically all the things that made you great, that got you to that management role, probably half of it you're working to the opposite. Like you just have to change, your mindset has to change like that. But the second part is the impact it has on companies. We were talking before the show started. I talked about one of the things that we talk about that my company addresses is this concept called no man's land. When a company's too big to be small, but too small to be big. And what happens is you have to transfer from being very people driven and very behavioral driven to being systems driven and management driven. And by the way, while we're recording this, there's this debate in the tech community about should it be founder led or manager led? And it's, it's a bunch of noise about, yes, the answer is should it be founder led or manager led? Yes. The leader needs to be involved. Yes, yes, they need to be good managers, all those things. And I talk about sales managers as being, a critical lever because, once you get to having about 2 to 3 managers, you've got a sales team that's typically at least 20 people. You begin to grow, and suddenly the communication and what you need to do, you need to maintain that agility, but the determination of what's going to get through to the people that are meeting with your customers, that goes through the manager. And what comes back up comes through the manager. And so if the manager doesn't understand their role, or the company doesn't understand how the role is different than just somebody who commands their troops, you can be doing everything else wrong. Everything else right. And you just lose all of the traction. You lose all of the focus. You get commoditized, and your organization picks up complexity. So a manager is either going to simplify the world for the business or multiply the complexity and drag it down.
That's it. I mean, you scale, whenever you scale anything, you scale everything. If you're going to scale success, good. If you're going to scale and you're not doing that well, you're going to scale failure. It's like putting fabulous tech into place. I've got a fabulous piece of tech. Yeah, you're going to automate failure. You're going to automate and make it bigger and better and worse.
Yeah, and I think people lose a really important, like, scale has become this badge of honor. I'm scaling. And I had somebody who told me, yeah, we scaled to $10 million. We scaled to $100 million. Or, oh yeah, we've scaled to 1,000 employees. And I'm like, no. You've grown to 100 million. You've grown to 1,000 employees, whatever the case may be. Scale is growth with increased predictability and lower cost of growth. So when you tell me, and I'm sure you've seen this, you've got an entrepreneur, they're running a $5 million business, they commit to growth, they start doing 10, 25, $100 million. They're working more hours, they're making less money, they've got more stress. I'm like, okay, look, sometimes you got to go through that. I'm not saying that that's wrong. I am saying that's not scale. Yeah. Right. And so that manager is crucial to scale, because that's where, that is the universal translator, if you will, within the organization, is how does that, and this is amazingly true in the sales and marketing space, because in sales and marketing, you have this customer who gets a vote in the process as well, but it's also true in operations and accounting in more of those closed systems. And I think, in my research of companies that really grow effortlessly, the place where they excel, and sometimes they don't even realize that is where they excel, is that that management level group is simplifying the world for their teams, making it easier to execute.
Yeah, and it's that simplification, I think, that is the cleverest part. Doing things simply is really difficult, and I thought, like, a lot of people,
well said,
overcomplicate the whole leadership management thing like crazy. You say, oh, we need to send everybody off to Harvard or what? No. Just make sure people know what their job is. Their job is to make other people successful. Pretty much, end of. Make other people successful. It's not about you anymore, sweetheart. It's about you need to make other people successful. Leadership is getting people to where they would not get on their own, using the simple tools of management. Yeah.
Too often in that overcomplication is we look to our managers to be the drivers of the organization, doing more with less. Mm. And what you find is the way you simplify the game and you drive improvements is those managers should be focusing on doing less with more.
Yes, doing less. There's forever and ever, I think, look at politics, look at any part of the world, And any problem we have, we add things to it. Oh, we've got a problem here. This isn't working. Well, let's add 5 more people. Let's add a process. Let's add. No, 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 please don't do that. Subtract, take away, do less, simplify.
You know, another lesson that I talk about in the book is a different kind of application of the 80-20 rule. What I have found is if you take a look at what any company is doing, about 10 to 20% of what they're doing actually really matters. Now that doesn't mean that the 80 or 90% don't matter. It just means that 80 to 90% of what you're doing, as long as you're not doing it particularly badly or you're not doing stupid things, like that's fine. Those aren't the things that are going to make the difference in the outcomes that you're seeking. The best thing you can do is figure out what is that 10 to 20% that really drives the difference for your organization, for what you're trying to do. Focus in on that. Bill Walsh, American football coach, wrote a book. His autobiography was called The Score Takes Care of Itself. My autobiography one day is going to be The Sale Takes Care of Itself. Right? If you do these things right, the sale and the revenue, they take care of themselves. It's really identifying it's hard. It's not complicated. And that's where I agree with you that we overcomplicate things. The hard part is identifying. And then I think it comes down to guts. I used to say discipline, but increasingly in today's connected world, it's the courage to stay with that 10 to 20%, to say, look, this is what matters. I'm sticking to this, even though every time I log into LinkedIn or I watch a YouTube or TikTok video, it's telling me, here's what I should do. Look how easy this is, right? And I think that like that's my recipe. That's what I've learned as the recipe to success from studying businesses.
Yeah, simplification all the way. Focus and simplification. What do you think are the key skills, key competencies that sales managers need most to drive growth? So if you look at your 80-20, right? Maybe what are the key ones that they need to be able to do?
So I think this is probably true in any job that involves creation. And so like one of the challenges that you have as a sales manager is you never get to do the same thing twice. I'm not an accountant, but I know I took an accounting class and I know that the debits have to equal the credits at the end. I know a really good accountant, if you ask them what is 2 + 2 equal, they'll whisper in your ear, what would you like it to equal? So that's the creative accounting side of things. But for the most part, that process is, it's a highly replicatable process. As a matter of fact, governments have approved the process that you need to follow for them to be certified. So any role that involves creation, I think the first most important skill is curiosity. I think everything needs to come from a place of curiosity. I think when you're holding people accountable, if you're holding them accountable from the standpoint from a mindset of curiosity, it's an open conversation. If you're holding people accountable from a mindset of judgment, which is the opposite of curiosity, then it's a very closing conversation. So curiosity is the big thing. I think there needs to be empathy. I think empathy is something that's just gotten so overlooked. I used to coach college baseball. I was a hitting coach. And the thing that I loved about hitting is everybody has a different body. They've got different biomechanics. They've got a different style. They've got a different approach. Hitters are all trying to do the same thing, but they have to take their individual path to be able to do that. And one of the things that I'm seeing, I call it, we're botifying our salespeople. We're turning them into the equivalent of, programmable algorithmic bots, instead of saying, you've got this style, you've got that style. Let's embrace that style. And this salesperson's gonna be successful doing it differently than that salesperson, though there's still going to be an underlying mechanics of what is happening. That's why strong sales process and sales methodology is important. That's where, like, I talk about milestones. I want to know, where do I need to be from point 1 to point 2, right? How I get there, that's up to you, right? I'm somebody, I take big swings. I'm much more of, I like to have big impact. I don't have the patience to do the repetitive things and just stay on it and on it and on it. I kind of joke around sometimes and say, I throw the haymaker, and if they go down, then we're good. And if they don't, then I find somebody that, but one of the best salespeople I've ever met. And if I could ever hire him, I would hire him in half a second. He is just absolutely methodical. Looking at it from the outside, I'm like, who's gonna, like, what you do is so small, no one would even notice it. But again, it's his game, it's the way he works, and it's been outstanding. So I think you need to have the empathy to understand what's going on, so that you can coach and guide. And then I think the third element, there's a lot of talk about management, but I think it's more about the coaching. Because that salesperson has to have a conversation with somebody that they don't know what's going to happen. It's always going to be variant. And if I'm in a telling you what to do, the situation is going to be different enough. You're not going to know. But if I can help you make sense of things and understand your path and connect, oh, this is like that and different, then you're going to be more and more and more self-sufficient. And the thing is, you don't need to do everything right to successfully make a sale. You just need to be able to facilitate that conversation. Your job is to lead the conversation. And I think we still have this place where people are spending, both in marketing, in sales, where we're so focused on the directive that we forget the buyer wants to buy because they've got a problem that hurts. We've got to get the noise out of the way so they can understand what is their problem, what is the best way to solve the problem, and why are we the best option.
That's it.
Right? And I call, by the way, I call that conversation a best friend's conversation.
Yeah.
Right. I would say, how do you know if you're talking to your customer the right way? If they were your best friend, would you feel natural? If your best friend were having this conversation, would they like, this is normal? Or would they go, who is this person? So Paul, I'm far more sarcastic than any of the rules say you should be in a sales conversation, but I'm sarcastic with my best friends.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a very natural, genuine thing for me. I've got somebody on my team. They're very, very serious. Right. And early on, because they would listen to my calls and they would see the success that I was having, and I would see them trying to mimic those things. I'm like, whoa, that's not who you are.
To thine own self be true.
Yes. Yep.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I'm loving this. I mean, the coaching thing, I mean, you talked about coaching versus management. And I think that if you do it wrong, the two never meet. I think if you do it right, the two never separate. I mean,
yeah.
Even if you're doing your one-to-ones, right? And I've got a little giveaway that I do is like how you should reboot your one-to-ones. And core part of it is coaching in the one-to-one. You've got to, that's part of your management journey. It's how you set objectives, how you give feedback. It's a coaching conversation. And turning your managers into a coach, you don't have to send them off to Harvard again or whatever it is. You just need to get them to ask a question. Every time somebody comes to them and asks them a question, boss, Doug, how do I do this? You don't answer them. You say, what are our options, Doug? And Doug then comes up and says, whoa, and they do the work.
And that's why I can't speak to other management, but that's why sales management is so hard, because that person who's getting asked a question by their salesperson became a hero.
Yes.
Because they answered that question. And now they have to go from, oh, wait a second, I know the answer. I've known the answer for 10 years. And now I have to figure out, how do I help you answer your own question? That nails the, and I agree with you completely. If managing and coaching, when done right, you don't know the difference.
That's it.
I think something that people forget is every human, and especially in the growth world, we can only operate from a place of confidence, right? And so one of the lessons that I learned, and it was a very hard lesson for me to learn, because I've always been, top performer. I don't need you to, talk me up. Just tell me what I need to do differently so that I can be better, so I can be better, so I can be better. Right. And so that's how I would manage people. It's like, you You did 90% right, but I'm all about the 10% that you need to do better. And I'd burn my people out and I'd frustrate them, and their performance just went to hell. And I realized I was taking their confidence away. Mm-hmm. So one of the questions that I've learned to ask is, when I'm about to say something, first thing is it true? And then the second thing is, will sharing this do any good? I learned that oftentimes what I want to say is true, but it won't do any good if I share it. Right. So figuring out how, I learned this in coaching baseball, is that if you can only work on one thing at a time. And if we need to fix where your feet are, me talking to you about where your hands are will only confuse you. Right. And how can I operate always from the standpoint? Like, if someone can't do the job, they shouldn't be in the job. Right. That's not a management or coaching issue. That's a selection issue. And you've got to figure that out based on your organization. But most people can do the job. So you've got to operate from the standpoint of, where is the can, and then operate from the can and build up from that. And that's where you start getting a whole lot more progress, a whole lot faster.
You build in strengths. You turn somebody who's a 7 out of 10 into a 9 out of 10, rather than somebody who's a 3 out of 10 into maybe a 3.5.
And you know what, Paul? I don't think anyone's a 9 or a 10. Like, one of the things that drives me crazy is this concept of the A player. Go out and hire the A player. Well, I'll tell you what, an A player in one environment is a D player in another environment. Yeah. The system and the structure needs to be built for success. And that's the place where, man, I've seen companies spend lots of money and they do a whole lot of things well, but they don't build their sales organization for success. If they ran their manufacturing side of their business the way they ran their sales side, they would have been bankrupt decades ago. Yeah. You've got to have, and that is the focus of the book, of the revenue acceleration framework, is what is the structure, the systems, and what's the approach so that your people can be free to perform. If they're having to figure out their own process, if they're having to figure out how to do what they're doing, and each person is doing it differently, not stylistically differently, but processed differently, then so much energy is being used up in just thinking about what I'm doing that you can't pay attention to your customer. You're not going to have the impact on the market that you need to have. Build that structure, the systems, and the process, and you'll unlock the performance ability.
And you end up with your managers looking at 5 different people doing roughly the same thing, but taking 3 steps or 9 steps or 5 steps and 2 calls or not calls. How am I supposed to support these different people doing different things? How am I supposed to track it? How am I supposed to report on it? And right. You are my boss, and I'm going to have to come to you and say, Doug, I think this is what our commit is going to be. I think this is where we're going to land today, but I'm not sure because I can't track it. I have no idea what's going on.
Or one person who does it 10 times, and each time they do it, it's, it looks like it's 10 different people who are doing it because there's no baseline with which to compare to say what is normal. Like, the thing that I love about sales is there's never a normal day. There's never a normal experience, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't define normal, because normal becomes your baseline.
Yeah.
And now you can, with that baseline, you can now assess, okay, well, this is different. And anybody who's trying to master anything, actually, my team just had an offsite and we did a workshop at Second City, the famous improv troupe. And improv has a set of rules, has a baseline, so that every performance can be unique and different and creative and funny. But if that baseline weren't there, it would just be confusing.
It's like jazz. It's like, anything. I've got a wonderful friend, and he's a dancer. And he says it takes an awful lot of discipline to be a free spirit.
Mm-hmm.
An awful lot.
I like that. I'm going to steal that one.
Please do. You listen to a good jazz combo, and some of the best ones. Oscar Peterson, he's a classically trained musician. The guy can eat, sleep, and make that piano sing so that he can break all the rules when he needs to.
So, Charlie Parker, a great jazz musician, one of my favorite quotes from him is, master your instrument, master the music, then forget about all that bullshit and just play. But master the music and
Yeah.
master the instrument come first. It's mastery that enables that to happen. And there is, Ian Anderson, who never learned how to play the flute. He just from Jethro Tull.
Yeah.
He just taught himself to play the flute, so he plays it wrong, but he still has a process to playing the flute that enables him to improvise and do things that you would think you couldn't do on the flute. But again, it's that absolutely, it's having that discipline and knowing what is the baseline. That's what frees up creativity. And a lot of people think, oh, no, if we bring process in, well, we're going to take away create. No, it's the exact opposite. Good process, just like good management unlocks creativity, good process unlocks creativity and unlocks performance.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've had that conversation many times, and you're coming in and talking about process, and the sales folks are saying, "Oh, you're going to restrict my creativity," and the wise heads in the board are saying, "We're going to restrict your creativity, but we're not. You're going to put a box in place that allows you to color outside the lines."
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, I think in the what I think actually restricts their creativity is the lack of restriction to their creativity, right?
Yes.
There is no aspect. I talk a lot, and I talk about this in the book. I share the concept. We talk about speed versus velocity, and we're a world obsessed with speed. But the problem is speed is only a measurement of how fast you're going.
Yeah, there's no direction.
Right. There's no direction, right? Velocity is
vector.
How long does it take for me to get there? And the thing that's interesting, I love this in every discipline, dance, music, sports. You'll hear the term, the game is going too fast for them right now. They need to slow it down. They need to slow the performance down. And they don't mean that physically they need to slow down necessarily. But what they mean is that context has been lost, and they've lost control of their movements or control of how they're viewing things, et cetera. And in order to have more impact, they need to slow down. You take a look at a track athlete. I had my son, a friend of my son, was a high school track star. And early on, the problem he had was he moved too fast. His body moved too fast. And so what his running coach taught him was, you need to slow down. And in this case, physically, you need to slow down so that you can go faster. It probably took him a year to understand what that move. How does me going slower, right? Then you watch, we just finished the Olympics. You watch them run the 100-meter sprint, and you go, oh, that's what's slowing down. Very little movement, everything moving in one direction. That's velocity over speed.
Cool. Totally. I love it. What are you working on just now? What do people need to come and find you for?
Well, the book is still fresh, new. We're excited about that. What we do on a daily basis, the book comes from a bunch of real world experience. We work with mid-market, mid-sized companies on how they're growing and scaling growth. How do you get more? The term I use, Paul, is how do you generate more juice for the squeeze? I'm too lazy to squeeze that orange too hard. I want to maximize the juice for the squeeze.
The most juice for the squeeze. I love that. And we can find you at lyftenablement.com.
Lyftenablement.com and Doug Davidoff on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Last question before we wrap is, if you had 10,000 billboards and you could share one message with the world, what would it be?
Play your game. You're competing with yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's probably the hardest thing today is to really get that. I find myself, I get into trouble when I've when I've started to play somebody else's game, or I see somebody else. I'm like, oh wait, they're having success. Wait, we need to do that. Right. Now that doesn't mean I don't learn from them, but the key is, I'm a different person. My strengths are different than somebody else's. And then the organization that I built, we've got a different thought process, and we win when we play our game. One of the things that's interesting in a services business that I'm in is, and I'm competitive. So when you make a sale, that's great. But when you make a sale and it turns out there's somebody, you know what, we probably shouldn't have been working with them. It's a horrible experience. And I've learned personally, I would rather lose a sale that I could have won than have won a sale that maybe I shouldn't have. And when we play our game, we learn, we grow faster, we see better results, and we have a whole hell of a lot more fun doing what we do. So my billboard would say, play your game.
Play your game. Doug Davidoff, Revenue Acceleration Framework author and CEO of Lyft Enablement.com. Thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Thanks, Paul.